Since their independence after the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, Ukraine had been a strategic location for Western European countries and the Russian Federation. As a consequence of the polarization between the two main ethnicities of the country, the Ukrainians and the Russian Ukrainians. During the Ukrainian crisis of 2013 to 2015, one of the hotspots of this conflict was the Crimean dispute in 2014, when the Russian government declared annexation of the territory violating Ukraine's state sovereignty and the Montevideo Convention. According to Andrews, the loss of Crimea was compounded by a well-armed pro-Russia separatist movement in eastern Ukraine, which has led to months of heavy but inconclusive fighting with the government forces.
The first theory will talk about realism, that is considered the oldest and it's also the most mainstream and known international relations theory. Realism can be analyzed from 6 principles of political realism by Hans Morgenthau. First, this theory says that society in general is governed by objective laws enrooted in human nature. This focuses on defining man in his natural state as selfish, and the main example of this is war. So, the fact that Russia seeks the annexation of Crimea through a war to achieve its own interests demonstrates the natural state of the human, which explains why war continue. The second principle tells us that the concept of interest is defined in terms of power, and it's the key consideration for the state according to Ceres. So from a realistic perspective, Russia's annexation of Crimea will be seen as an usurpation of power by Russia and an attempt to increase power in pursuit of self-interest, increasing their territorial power in the region. The third principle states that power is a universally valid concept, and in this case we consider it from the perspective in which, in spite of the fact that the most of the nations doesn't agree that Russia continues fighting for Crimea because it doesn't respect the sovereignty of Ukraine, the countries know the power that Russia has in the region, mainly military.
Also, Sevastopol, the peninsula's main city, has a port that gives the Russian fleet direct access to the Black Sea, including important maritime routes. The first one that joins the European Union with Central Asia through the South Caucasus Corridor and the Sea Caspian, which connects the Russian Federation with the Mediterranean and the Middle East, and it allowing the access to the Southern Hemisphere through Anatolia, the Turkish Straits, and the Channel of Suez. Following the fourth principle of Morgenthau that established that the state's actions are not concerned by universal moral principles, its take on Russia's invasion of Ukraine shows their blatant disregard for Ukraine and its people. It exposes, from the perspective of equality of power between nations, like Russian power is superior than Ukraine power, and with this knowledge took the decision, in order to gain more territorial power, to invade Ukraine during a moment of national weakness.
Now, we are going to analyze this conflict through liberalism theory with the following principles. Starting with Kant's 3 articles for global peace, we can note how both Russia and Ukraine lack the liberal tradition of government required to achieve global peace. With free elections only after the fall of the Soviet Union, obtaining low scores in multiple indexes of economic and personal liberties in the world as in 2014. Furthermore, being the European Union, the Liberal Union, and the transnational organization that would create economic interdependence as mentioned by Kant's 2nd and 3rd articles, Russia and Ukraine lack a further requisite to achieve regional peace, both not being members of the organization.
Then, following a neoliberal perspective, as Burchell states, the objective for policymakers should be an open global market where goods and services can pass freely across national boundaries. Idea enforced with the talks between Ukraine and the EU for a future membership in the transnational organization since 2008, and reinforced with then President Poroshenko after 2014, potentially benefiting from the economic power of the Union and shifting away from Russia. Another perspective to view the conflict comes from an analysis to Wilson's 14 principles, one of the precursors of a more defined liberal theory. In accordance to Wilson's document, we could see Ukraine's approach to the West and NATO's presence in countries as close as Poland as an intimidation to Russia, which could perceive a violation of Wilson's fourth principle. Besides that, another layer of debate consists of the principle of a nation's self-determination, with both sides potentially having legitimate claims on the issue.